and welcome to Happy You Asked, the podcast where we explore a little thing called happiness, one awkward conversation at a time. I am Erin Clare, your host who remembers very well what dial up internet sounded like. It was annoying, squeak, quack, caw, 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 and then it was slow. And this is why Gen Xers, one of the many reasons why we're grumpy. Anyway, I'm joined today by Matthew Kennedy, who is a composer, educator, and arts advocate currently based in Northwest Ohio, where he is the director of music at Heidelberg University. You may recall that university from the last episode. His work has been performed on 5 continents in 15 countries and received critical acclaim, including honors and commissions from BMI, Opera on Tap, College Music Society, Dynamic Music Festival at NYU, World Saxophone Congress. I love that name. They want them to be a Congress like a regular Congress. Oh, how amuse me. And the Northwestern University New Music Conference. He resides in Tiffin, Ohio, with his wife, studio artist Erin Kennedy. Great name. And four children. That's a lot of children to navigate. Welcome to Happy You Asked, Matthew. It's an honor to chat with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited for this.
Yay. So I'm going to start off with the big question. Matthew, what is your definition of happiness?
Well, that's an easy one. No.
Mhm.
Um, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind whenever I think of happiness is an arrival. There's certainly a level of like ecstatic joy or overjoyed, but also there's this element of assuredness that comes with that of like I'm
Mm,
steadfast in this feeling of joy. Um, I oftentimes think of happiness as some sort of arrival on a journey, um, and I not necessarily something that's you're going to see it along the way, but really I think of happiness as like mountaintop moments along the
mm.
way, and typically there's some sort of journey to get there.
I like that idea of arrival, like whatever it was you were going towards, you've landed there. So yay,
Sure.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like a point on a continuum or a spectrum. It's not like an end point. It's not like A to B. It's more of like, well, that's a point along a journey. Like this is a point of happiness along the way.
Love it. Can you describe a moment when you felt that way?
Yeah. So for me, I think the bigger the happiness, if I can describe it that way, usually it's the bigger the journey, or the heavier the lift, or the longer the journey, or the bigger the steps. So getting that first full-time professorship, something that I'm sure
Mhm.
you can feel as well. I had graduated doctoral degree, and it was about a year and a half later, I think, whenever I had gotten that. And I had not four of those children, but two of them at that time. And so there was this immense, profound struggle of this existential crisis of what is next. What did I just do? I just went through 10 years of school for what? And you're kind of going through this sort of arduous task. And I remember the phone call of getting that first full-time professorship job. I was an adjunct at the time, but to feel like that, there was this sense of being overjoyed, this sense of arrival that all of this hard work kind of paid off for that moment. That's a big one for sure.
Oh, 100%. Like I recall that feeling. It's like, oh my God, thank God, thank God. Because you don't know. And that's
Yeah.
crossed, with anxiety too, which is,
Mhm.
the things that are outside of our control and we can't like make them happen. We can take steps towards them, we can do all the right things, but ultimately, in many ways, it's not really up to us. It's up to fate, kismet, somebody, right?
Somebody, something that maybe have a good understanding of you or couldn't care less, uh, or somewhere
Yes.
in the middle.
And
Um,
the minute you serve on a job committee, you're like, oh,
yes.
this isn't as predictable as one would like.
Well, and then you also realize how much time you're actually able to give to all of those applicants, right?
Mm,
Of like less than what you would like 100% of the time. Truly,
yes.
even with folks on campus, you're usually like gathering up, okay, who was this one? Remind me of their work. Oh, I wanted to ask them this. But it's
Mm.
still not the in-depth sort of stuff that you would want for something that could be life-changing. It really isn't anything short of that, you know?
100%. And then even a brain fart and you forgot somebody until the end, you're like, oh no, right? It could be that simple. And but that's also life. I mean, let's face
It
it.
is.
It's not, it's not like you can do all the right things and stuff's going to be crappy anyway sometimes, just because it is. That's because.
Yeah, yeah. My second eldest daughter, we've used this idea of your boundary of control or your bubble of control of what can you actually change, what can you actually do, and that's a frustrating thing. She's 10 now.
Oh, that's a big age for that.
It is of like what can you actually control, and the things you can't control, why are we bothered with them? Why are we? It should try to minimize the amount of space. Now, obviously, that's easier said than done, whether you're 10 or you're,
Or you're
110.
75. I think it's the
Exactly.
big like human condition.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and it's worse and worse because there's so much we know and so little we control right now.
That's true. I think there's a blessing of that sort of ignorance of what can I control, what can I not? And as your eyes are opened, you're like, oh God, oh no.
This world is whoosh, woo, woo, what can I do? What can I do? How am I going to save it? Like we got
Exactly.
to save all of it. And there really it becomes this sort of like either we can save it all or do nothing, right? Like
Hmm.
it feels that way, and I feel like that's part of pe what people struggle with. Like doing the little you can isn't always good enough, I think, for some people. Anyway, I'm getting off on my sidetrack about happiness. This crap
That's
I think about.
okay.
Has your definition of happiness changed over your life, do you think?
100%. I'd be concerned if it hadn't, to be honest. I'd genuinely like you've lived all of this life experience, however much you cram into whatever amount of days that you have. If it's not changed by your experiences, oh good gracious, I have some thoughts for that. But no, I think growing up in the circumstance that I did, which was, fairly, under the poverty line, growing up in rural Indiana, there was this sense of happiness as being like that security kind of there,
Mhm.
right? And there was a sense of it being prolonged, as in it was my arrival idea, but it was like, well, once you get there, then it's that forever, which for some people is their description of heaven. If I'm being honest, of like, oh, once you get in the door, you're good, you're fine. Um, I think that was the way for some time until you start really living and seeing, and then or even just progressing in your career or with your social relationships or your familial relationships. There's this idea of these moments of being overjoyed, these moments of feeling fulfilled, and assuredness. But then you realize, like, oh, it's still going. Like, it's still going. It didn't stop. It's not the end of the movie. So we're still working on. And I think that made me realize, like, oh, these mountaintops just keep on getting bigger. And some of them,
Mhm.
there's lateral moves that could happen. But in general, it just keeps on going. Like, it's not
Mhm.
necessarily just an arrival that's, your final destination sort of place. It's more of, it's a continuation.
Yeah, and I would teach in both intro to film that I taught quite a bit of, and in my courses on happiness. That was one of the main lessons is we are trained to think like happiness is the end of the movie, and then the couple kisses, they get married, and bam.
Yeah,
But then what happens, right? Somebody's got to do the dishes, right? You don't just like bliss out forever. And then like,
exactly.
oh gosh, our basement's flooding. And now there's like, are those ants, right? And so like yeah, I like that idea that it's sort of like lateral. Like sometimes I conquered the ant problem. Yay, right? It's not, it's sort of a little moments. And life does just keep going. And it just keeps going. And we have to find happiness anyway, even though we're
Yeah.
like happiness and planning for retirement and happiness in, or contentment and whatever that means. It's
Yeah.
continual like searching for that. Cause yeah, that kiss at the end of the movie is just like that's the start. That's not the end. And then their
Yeah.
struggles are gonna keep going.
It's kind of like this never-ending sitcom, and we're on season 39. Uh, and there might be little moments of that, but like it's not getting canceled, not for
Yeah.
a while at least, or you never
Hopefully
quite know
not,
when it will
right?
be. Yeah.
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 Well, what do you think? You talked like about growing up and, poverty, things like that. There's lots of different theories on the role of like suffering, hardship, like crap, and
Yeah.
how it plays with happiness. What are your thoughts about that?
That's something that's really changed, especially in, probably the last 5, 10 years. Parenthood did a bit of that. Being out of that sort of space has kind of given some perspective, as it usually does. Um, there's a line in a Ben Folds song that says, "Looking back, being poor wasn't such a drag in hindsight." And it's like, wow, that's in hindsight for sure. In the midst of it, I'm on
Yeah,
fire.
not
We're on
fun.
fire. Everyone's on fire. Um, but in hindsight, you start to realize there's some things that you learn from it, that you gain from it. I think for your question, it's probably informed my idea of this journey to something, that there are some hard steps along the way. And for me, I think just just in experiencing it, there's this sense of a greater happiness the more arduous the journey. Now, some things are just like, this was senselessly like violent and brutal on me, like that was traumatic and it didn't need to happen. But if it was like this sense of um, deep work, it gives a worth to the journey along the way, if that makes some sense. Um,
It does. It
in
does.
in music, this is a big part of what I think about as a composer in terms of tension and release and pieces.
Mm,
So I could set up a problem that I need to resolve, and that could be resolved in moments. It could be a momentary sort of thing of boom, it's nothing, and the payoff for that is minimal. It could be interesting and quirky and fun or whatever it might want to be, but in my experience, these sort of problems that take a little bit longer, or the journey is a little more circuitous, or kind of my space from A to B has been obfuscated, or I've had to go around other sort of things. That arrival moment really has a deep sense of being overjoyed and like, that was
mhm.
really worth that journey. And
Yeah,
that's
the
that's
tingles. The tingles.
exactly. Yeah, that's such a big thing for me in the music that I love. And then also the music that I write. I'm really thinking about that tension and release. And again, if there's not some journey to it, it doesn't, it almost feels cheap. It's somewhat quick. And that's okay. Like cheap happiness, cheap, cheap
It's sometimes
release
it's good,
is
right?
there for
Mindless
sure.
movies are needed as well as deep ones.
Absolutely. So they serves their purpose. They both serve their purpose. But I think of pursuing those sort of long-term things. That's really informed my sense of seeking out contentment in my own life and finding joy amidst the journey, and realizing that this could be a step along the way for something that's even bigger.
Yeah, I love that. I have two kids, and my youngest, who is 16 years old, is
Wow.
a composer too and a musician, jazz piano,
Excellent.
and writes nonstop. Like it's just in his DNA, he has to. And uh, I adore music myself. So I was so excited to talk to you. Like music shapes moment I wake up, moment I go to sleep. I was, it's everything. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts about how music shapes our moods or can shape our moods or what place it plays in this whole idea of happiness.
For me, it affects the vernacular of how I talk to other people. It's a field that is full of metaphor. And so I find myself trying to use that in lots of different places and relating things to lots of other things that don't have direct um, sort of corollaries sometimes to other people's brains. Um, because so much of what we're doing, I'm talking about tension and release, and it's wiggly air. Like, what do you
Mm,
mean? So it's
yeah.
been encultured within us to know what that means, and that's different from one person to another. Um, and I think the more that we understand, we all have musical identities that have been built into us that we're either running towards or running away from. It might
Mm,
be, oh, my parents listen to that and I really don't want to. Or it's, oh, my family listen to that and I really want to, actually, because there's nostalgia or there's, a comfort there. It could be, I think of this piece of this time. It could be, this is accompanying this film, and I absolutely love the way it makes me feel because it's this heightened sense of intensity, or romance or drama, or whatever, all the great things that music can add to other fields. Um, I think it really informs how we talk to others, though. I really
mhm,
do, especially as someone who teaches music, and I talk to my students about this in film music classes that I teach, of this idea of How am I heightening what you're experiencing? How am I um, adding to that effect? How am I moving you emotionally? That's this additive sort of thing that is a metaphor for something else. Like I said, it's just wiggly air. But if I put something because of rhythm or harmony or timbre along with something else, then we have this sense of, oh, that's heightening that other thing. So it would make total sense that if your morning's going a particular way or you're trying to change it, you could have music to help heighten that into a different way. Um, or you could have nostalgia heightened because you hear a song on the radio, right?
Mhm.
Like there's so many fun ways that you can relate just based on how you're hearing music. This happened to me the other day. I was in the car and Sonny and Cher's "I Got You, Babe" came on, which I love, but lovely tune whenever that came out, late 60s probably, maybe early 70s, probably late 60s. um, all I can think of whenever I hear that song is Groundhog's Day, the movie with Bill
Yeah,
Murray,
yeah,
because
yeah.
that's a central plot point basically in the movie of boom, he hears that song. That had nothing to do with Sonny or Cher's intention for that love song, but it's so funny that we can tie things to different sort of spaces, and I still had joy and happiness from thinking about that movie that I particularly like, even though it's through this vehicle of this love song that had nothing to do with that movie whatsoever. But it was able to refract through my life of this sort of different point with it, if that makes any sense at all.
Totally. And I think especially sometimes it's a little different now because the exposure to music, since it's not radio play like it
Yeah.
used to be, like what I grew up on. And so we would hear the same songs over and over, and it was really determined by someone else. And,
Yeah.
my kids are growing up in a different way than I am. So I think about the tone, Unchained Melody, right?
Yeah.
Great song. But it was so overplayed when I was young that there was like a time when it was researched, right? In the
Is that with Ghost, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they played it on the radio, and so I was like, if I hear that song again, it makes me violent even to this day to, like, hear that song, and it's a
Yeah.
great song,
Sure.
but, because of that exposure, it triggers something else. It's not just the song, it's the
Yeah.
context around it, and there's not that same experience. There might be to some extent, like, maybe, I don't know, if you heard too much Pink Pony Club later, then you'll be like, "That song makes me angry," even though this
Sure.
is a joyful song. And I think about that quite a bit because the types of yoga I teach are music based.
Sure.
And yeah, and when we teach, something that's calming like that, those memories can trigger if we use, music with words.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just part of one style you're going to teach. And I'm like, too bad. And there's another style though, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts when it's more like you're trying to do entrapment, so certain frequencies, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and, with singing bowls
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
gongs, all that goodness. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts about that, if you've thought much about it at all? I don't know, like, if
I
that's
think I have. I think other folks have some different takes on particular frequencies and things of that matter. I think in general, though, music as a means to assist in meditation, that's a big part of what I enjoy. Um, or the act of performance as part of that as well. Um, each spring, I have several of my classes do a collection of pieces called Sonic Meditations by a
Oh,
piece called
lovely.
Pauline Oliveros. Um, we often do them outside. There is a park about a half mile from campus that has a lovely stream running through it. And it's just nice. And it's always early in the morning and it's the week before finals week. So they need to de stress and be present in a way that's not all bad cortisol inducing sort of moments. Um, so a lot of it's just mindfulness, but some of them involve drones, some of them involve different pitches, and more than anything, it's just becoming aware. It's what Pauline, a phenomenal composer, passed away about a decade ago now, really groundbreaking composer. But it's what she coined this phrase of deep listening, this idea of being aware of what is happening intentionally or unintentionally in the space, what is real and what is make believe in the space. So, this is idea of, well, I'm hearing this song, but I'm also thinking of Bill Murray slapping a alarm clock that has nothing
Mhm.
to do with this song. So, that's a sense of imaginary sort of sound that's going along with it. But there's this idea of being present in that space which for me is such a big part of the meditation practice that I think of, and just mindfulness in general. Um, but for some folks, it's nice to latch on to a consistent sound. So whether it's some sort of
Mhm.
singing bowl or gongs or various other things, there's this idea of consistency that I think can be soothing, or slow changes. If there is something else, it's not something that's sudden, if that makes some sense.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
Yeah,
that.
I like that. I like the idea of the consistency and being able to latch onto that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that helps with those situations. And again, for me, it's been interesting because if I've been in yoga classes or mindfulness or any combination of those, I find myself listening to the things the instructor's telling me to listen to, but I'm also listening to the floor creaking or a door, or if there's some sort of fan going on, that I find enjoyment out of those just as much as I would anything else.
Mhm.
Um, to where those are the interesting sort of things that happen. And that's like a very John Cage sort of approach to the space of I'm aware of all of these sounds that are going on around me, and I invite them rather than I'm trying to block them out.
Yes, that's one of the interesting things I think quite a bit about because I've noticed a number of people have talked about how, especially younger generations right now, and I don't think it's just them, but a lot of people talked about it, have problems with anything that's dissonant they don't
Mm,
like being able to deal with it. And so one of the techniques when you're doing like mindful hearing sound or even sound bowls or doing like a
yeah.
dissonant sound and letting people sit with the dissonance, right?
Hmm.
Rather than resist it and say stop
Hmm.
and be like, hey, this is okay. It's interesting and how it's not that pleasant.
Hmm.
And this I guess there's this idea that everything should be pleasant at all times, but if we train ourselves to be okay with that which isn't that pleasant, that
Yeah.
helps us in other paths in our life, other parts that like me taking, the tea into Boston and it's disgusting and like being able to like deal with that and still be okay rather than have this heightened level of tension.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about this idea of dissonance, right? Of things
Yeah.
that don't sound great and what we
Hmm.
do with them.
Well, that's another thing. I've often tell first year students that what we're studying, whenever we study how music's put together, is really the treatment of dissonance. How are we arriving to it? How are we, once we're there, what are we doing with it, and how is it leaving, if it's leaving, I guess, in your comment there. um, and I think different cultures have different approaches for this. I think of Southeast Asian cultures that could have a very different sense of dissonance, and
Mhm.
compared to some Western cultures. And it's not, no culture is a monolith within this. um, but I think what you're describing about younger generations might be a limiting of the music or the types of music that they are listening to where if it's all from a very similar source or produced in a similar way, perhaps they're um, less used to it. And in my experience at least, usually it's just exposure is one of the chief ways of remedying that, of just being aware, this is what you're actually hearing, or this is something. If you liked them, they were also influenced by this person, which maybe is a little more far
Mhm.
out than what you're used to. My eldest child has really gone on a big David Bowie kick this summer for one reason or another,
Yay.
which is great, and I'm so proud, and it's a great thing, like awesome. um but there are some fun moments within some of his music comparatively, and by pop music standards, that are kind of like, oh, that's kind of trippy, that's kind of far out there, and this is maybe an interesting, strange sort of moment for me. um, and having conversations about that, or realizing, oh, that can be part of the journey, and perhaps we really feel um, that this journey is greater because we went on these extra steps. um, to where it's like, okay, so if I'm hearing Space Oddity, and I have this
Mhm.
main character, Major Tom, that's going on this trip, I need to have this little freak out moment to show, like, oh, maybe he's concerned and there's some tension and we're unsure. And then once it blasts into that chorus, it's like, oh, there's this release of I'm now in space. And if I didn't have that moment, it would seem like, oh, I don't know if I'd get that same release, right?
Also, you can't really have space, Major Tom and just have this melodic little happy doo doo doo. It's not gonna
Exactly.
fit, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's a big thing, right? I really do, and I think there can be a journey there, and sometimes it's like I think we're more willing to go on the journey of dissonance if we kind of have a sense of where it's going, how it's releasing. In
Mm,
music, in film, we do this constantly. It doesn't have to be a horror movie for it to be dissonant. I can take a cue from a scene and just say, you know, this is what this sounds like without the visual, and you realize like, oh, that's kind of crunchier, that's kind of dissonant, and we're okay with it whenever it's on the screen because there's this dissonance within the characters or within the drama, and it's heightening it. But if we take it outside of that, just on its own, sometimes we see like, oh, that's kind of really dissonant to my ears. Um,
mm.
I don't think distance is necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it has to be resolved. For me, it permeates so much of music. Um, it's coloring, it's shading, it's everything. Without that sense of tension, it just feels like saccharine sweet, and it just feels like there's this fabricated sort of sense of like, well, I don't know what that was really for. I'm not sure what that journey was. um
Well, it's sort of then dissonance is almost like emotions,
yeah.
right? So there's sort of the sadness or stress, and then you have the release, which is like the joy, the happiness, and
Hmm.
you can't just have the happiness or it falls flat.
Yeah, and that's an interesting sort of bit, and I try to share this with students because there's different senses of dissonance, to be honest. Um there could be some senses of it with in terms of pitches, like you had mentioned the singing bowls that could be
Mm.
at odds with one another or clashing. There could be rhythmic dissonance to where it feels like those two things don't quite work together. There could be timbral dissonance, the color of the sounds. It sounds like nails on a chalkboard. That's a timbral dissonance more than anything else because it's just a high pitch, but we don't particularly like the color of that high pitch, which is kind of grating on us. So I think having an understanding of how dissonance works, you realize like, oh, I think that's just a part of life. And if I omit it altogether, it's like writing a book without adjectives or without
Yeah.
prepositions. It's kind of like you
This book
probably
sucks now. This
could, but
happiness book is not happy.
yeah, you're like you could probably figure out how to work around that, but like, why limit yourself? Why do that?
Yeah. Well, and I like the sort of theory that you can't then, just like in music, you can't have happiness if you don't have the other things. It won't exist. It only exists in relationship to the other emotions. Same with music. You can't have a resolution if you don't have
Yeah.
tension.
Well, it's quite interesting to find the works that dissonance plays a minimal role, we'll say, because we tend to relate them to things that sound childlike.
Mm.
I think of like nursery sort of rhymes and lullabies and some stuff like that, and that tends to sound juvenile, if I'm going to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah.
And perhaps part of like I've always found that compelling because perhaps the more that we're growing and experiencing life, we might realize that that dissonance is kind of a part of the journey itself. Um,
Yeah. No, and same with people who are just they always seem happy all the time. You're like, there's something off with you. Something not right. Because
yeah,
they're
and that's a way you
yeah.
could show that too. It's a dramatic tool of like I shouldn't trust you because this feels fake.
Yeah, because then you can't, experience empathy in the same way, have sort of depth of feeling.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was also thinking, um, about that exposure piece, right?
Hmm.
So often young people, they have, in some ways, less exposure to sound because I think about this being in Boston a lot.
Hmm.
Everybody has headphones on all the time.
Yeah.
And it's for many reasons. A lot of it's protection, right?
Sure.
um, but then also the algorithms that they're listening to are feeding them the same things over and over.
Hmm.
So unless they are intentional and seek out different sounds, it's not going to happen in their lives. Very probably not.
Yeah. This is a long-term problem. And I taught a class that one section of it was talking about how do you first hear new music or how are you exposed to new pieces of music. And it's really changed quite a lot because we've just been narrowing in and controlling more and more and more. So it might have been a radio DJ might be selecting pieces, and it might be based on I know this person, or the company really wants me to play this, or we're getting calls for this. But it's really broad based, right? And you might get record labels that start sending in things for you to play. So that starts to be like, oh, well, now the barrier of entry is I have to have a record label, or I should have this. But generally, even if you just send it in, it might get some play, and as long as there's a general consensus in your audience, it's probably going to get played again.
Mhm.
So there's some democracy somewhat there. It starts to get in more and more and more to where it's just major labels that are getting play during the major hours of the day, right? And so you might have like a college show late at night, and someone could send in their mixtape, and it might get played. And maybe if enough folks like it, it'll get played the next week, and maybe another station will pick it up. So grassroots stuff could still happen. In the 1990s, under President Clinton, we get some legislation that allows larger conglomerates to buy up radio stations and to buy up
Mhm. iHeartRadio,
TV
here we
stations.
are.
Say what?
Yep. iHeartRadio.
Yeah, yeah, to buy up radio stations and to buy up television channels, to where you have one company that's controlling programming over hundreds of radio stations or hundreds of channels or affiliates across the country. That starts to really rein in what can you do, because now they have like a recipe of like during your peak hours you're going to play these 40 tunes, and it starts to be more and more and more to where you really have to seek this out. And in that way, that's the groundwork for algorithms that we really get. There's some
Mhm.
democracy to begin with algorithms, but it's exponential, like away from democracy based on the number of plays, right? And just the number of outputs that you're getting from particular channels or companies, um, to where it's really difficult to get sort of any sort of foothold within this. Sometimes social media will give us a something will go viral, and
Like
perhaps it's a little,
TikTok.
yeah, it's a little flash moment that
Mhm.
you get folks that suddenly someone uses Unchained Melody in some sort of video that's meant to be humorous, and like, oh, I want to get to know that, and it's a little push, but it's still fighting against this big machine.
Yeah. And
I
they vary per platform too. So like
yes,
I have Spotify and I feel like that's the most restrictive. Spotify
it
gives
is.
me nothing new. Even if I ask it to, it'll be like, "No, you only get the same thing you will like. That's it." And then when they suggest something new, it's so often nothing I would enjoy.
Yeah,
And so I
it's.
seek out other sources because they're
Mhm.
not helping the issue.
It's a problem for sure, that oftentimes does not have artists who are creating in the rooms that are making those decisions, which tends to be just a bad choice. Of we're talking about all these people, but they're not here to actively speak, so we're probably going to misconstrue their wants or needs, or just completely ignore them altogether. Um, so that's a major issue, just to see how you're getting exposed to new music, because some platforms they have no incentive for that. They know. You liked this, so we should do that. Or what if we produced our own stuff? And you should like that. And that's the biggest thing with AI generated music right now, especially on Spotify, other platforms too. YouTube just, they just went through a thing to where they were not going to allow entirely AI based content to be monetized. Um,
Mhm.
just within the last few weeks, I think, at the time of recording. This is a big problem on Spotify, though, because the number of AI generated music that's on there that is being presented as real life artists, it's a real struggle. And I have a
Yeah,
hunch that's a struggle
that's
for the
a
next decade.
fishy.
Yeah,
Mm-mm, I
yeah,
don't like
not
that.
good. And again, make it, use the tool, absolutely. Just be forthright with what's going on, the same way
Yeah,
that we have to cite sources. Like I can cite that somebody said something, I just need to make sure I'm giving attribution, or that I'm letting you know, hey, this was produced by something else. Like that's all perfectly fine by me, but right now it's kind of a wild west with that, and
yeah,
I
and
don't
there's
have
something
much hope
particularly
for it.
offensive to me about doing that with music, because
Mhm.
music expresses the human condition so much, and then
Yeah.
to remove the human from it is like, "Oh, oh, no,
Well, yeah, I
you're
think
fooling
there's
me."
anytime that it's the way that we're using it to create art in general, um, which can be compelling and interesting, but I wonder at what cost.
Yeah,
Uh, whose art is it replicating? Because it's just replicating something else, and that's kind of the big question right now that I think will come to a head in the next like decade or two. Of okay, you're training this based on somebody's art. How are you compensating them for that? How are you doing that? And that's the $1 million question. I have no idea how that will happen or if it will happen, which is the biggest bummer.
Yeah. Well, we have to have hope or we just fall into a
For
pit. So
sure,
something
absolutely.
will happen
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we, yeah. All right. What do you do? Like, what types of practices do you do to help maintain happiness, or what do you do when you're feeling unhappy? What are some things you do?
So a big thing that has helped me kind of as the hills started getting bigger and bigger with my career, I was finding out like the following day after a premiere, I was just in the gutter, just completely. It got to the point to where for a while I was really scheduling the next morning after a big premiere completely off. Of like, if I can do nothing after this, that'd be great because I would be so down in the dumps following kind of the trough after this big mountaintop moment
Mhm.
of like just um, this giant dopamine hit that happens, this ecstasy of this great premiere or whatever it might be. The next day, I would just be completely, just completely destroyed. Um, so I really started seeking out contentment along the way, and for me, contentment is a word that I'm using for finding joy or assuredness on the journey rather than happiness as
Mhm.
an endpoint, right? Um, and I'm sure these are words that you use in these podcasts and your own work as well. And this is just the way that makes sense to me, at least, of finding that joy and assuredness along the way. So seeking that out, and that's where mindful. That's where that actually took me to trying to seek out mindfulness of if I'm just present and aware. And the other component that really helps me within that is finding gratitude. I
Mhm.
think that helps. So contentment and gratitude along the way, and knowing that joy or knowing that happiness might be those mountaintop moments, but those are all moments. That helps me also with the other part of that, which is understanding this is a dip that's also temporary.
Mhm.
I realize that there are these highs and these lows, and if I can find gratitude and contentment, those are nice equalizers that help me not feel as low. But it also, if I'm going to be honest, protects me sometimes from feeling the too high part. I kind
Yes.
of have to allow myself of like, no, that was a big heavy lift. You should really feel overjoyed about this. But there are other places to where it's like, no, I think you should just be really careful about this. That it kind of raises the lows and it lowers the highs, and I really have to remind myself on the ones that really feel like a big arrival moment. It's okay to feel this because that's a well earned joy that is meaningful for you in the long run.
Well, yes, and life is not reaching towards the moment where you're at the mountaintop, right? And you're like, ah, and the rest of the time you're just, this sucks, right? The joy is you get to create the music, you get to live
Yeah,
the day and day where you're doing that. That's also beautiful. And if we lessen that to say all that matters is that moment at the mountaintop, yeah, then after the mountaintop, what's the point,
you're
right?
screwed. Yeah,
Yeah.
and life won't have as many mountaintops as you need. If I'm going to be honest, to have that sense of fulfillment, right? And that's where we see burnout, and that's where we see folks that are just their career of they're just trying to make as many mountaintops as possible, so that way they get contentment or joy, um, to where it's
Mhm.
just more
Lots
and
of
more and more and
dopamine,
more.
lots of dopamine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Instead of finding like, what are you afraid of outside of the mountaintop moment? Like, what are you like? And that's so much of our life. I always tell my students, and they'll freak out about it. A big part of what we do in our field for composers might be call for scores, which is similar to like call for papers, sort of
Mhm,
presentation sort of things.
mhm.
I'll tell my students I might apply to 100 plus of those a year, still at this point. And I said it's a good year if I get 6 to 10. It's a
Oh, yeah.
good
Yep,
year. Like that's a banner year of like
yep.
I won those things, or I'm going to be invited to do this. Like that's great. And you
That's the
realize like
artist's life.
yeah, and it's like that is 6 to 10%. And you realize like that's the kind of work that's really there. And more importantly, I am not sustained on those 6 to 10 mountaintop moments that could happen during a year or whatever it might be. That I have to find contentment along the way in those spaces. Because
You
more
got to.
importantly, some of those 6 to 10 things might not be that great. It might be like, okay, well, now I'm hanging out in another hotel in another city, and I'm gonna have that moment, and maybe it wasn't a good experience, or the crowd wasn't so great, or the group didn't sound so good, or it something just didn't work. And it's kind of like, well, if I was waiting for that, there's such a letdown of like, oh, it wasn't what I
Yes.
thought it was. So finding that contentment and that gratitude along the way, I think is really, really crucial. So that way, whenever the mountain's not what you thought it was, you also feel content. You
Yeah, and
also
that's one
find
of
those
the
little happy
biggest
moments.
pieces of advice that I give is every day do something that makes you feel good, content.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
otherwise, if we're always chasing, like you see, that high, that dopamine, and we're not going to get enough of that in our life, this is one of the things that leads, well, I'm going to find it someplace else, maybe in drugs or in this and that, because I'm
Yeah.
chasing that dopamine hit. Instead of just saying, hey, you know what's really nice right now? Sitting outside, look at these trees, and this
Yeah.
is pleasant,
I
right? And
always
that's enough.
I always caution my students away from long-term carrots that are dangled in front of them because that's scary. I said short term, perhaps, of you got another week until Thanksgiving break. I get it. Chase the
Yeah.
carrot. You've got it. But the long-term ones of, well, if I do this for 20 years, or if I put in the like, it's like, no, no, you can't do that. Like those are the dangerous sort of bits, and deferred gratification, as un as out of vogue as that is currently, um, you know, it concerns me. It really, really, concerns me with the carrot dangling and what we might be willing to do. Uh, and
And
so,
you mean
yeah,
finding and also changing our idea of gratification
yeah,
too, right? So it doesn't have to be this whole like everything's perfect, but like
yeah,
this thing's really nice. I mean, sometimes for me, it's like a really good apple. I'm like, just enjoy it. And it doesn't have to be and a grant and you got this other big thing and you won the lottery, right?
yeah, yeah,
We got to find our happiness where it is because we can't always have those carrots. You're exactly right.
yeah, for sure.
Well, I have, and I'm so excited for this.
Okay.
The last thing I ask is, what is your one of your favorite songs? And this goes on a playlist, so
Ooh, okay.
yes.
Okay, so favorite songs. Okay, so I'm gonna go pop music. I'll do it that way. So that way it's got a
Whatever suits
vibe.
you. Wide open for you.
Yeah, yeah. As of the last like month or so, I've been digging back into a lot of the Beach Boys because of Brian Wilson just passing
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
He's a real figurehead that, just dealing with my own mental health over the years, it's kind of like, okay, I there's a kinship that's within there. Um,
Mhm.
and there's just so many good songs.
Oh,
Um,
she's brilliant.
yeah, yeah, just really, really brilliant. So I'm gonna say Beach Boys, Don't Worry Baby.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I love
There could be
it.
a whole bunch of other ones, but there's nostalgia within there. My parents did not listen to the Beach Boys growing up.
Mine
So
neither. Mine, mm-mm.
it's a weird nostalgia because it's not for it. I probably heard them on the radio, but not more than anyone else. But there's a nostalgia for a time period, I think,
Mhm.
of just like, oh wow. And then just as a songwriter, they're just really, really marvelous tunes.
Did you
And
see that biopic about
Love and
him,
Mercy,
Love and Mercy? Oh, it's so good.
yeah,
I
they're
love
so
it.
they're
I
so
love
good.
it. But
I love the way that
John
they did
Cusack,
it.
you really got to take a leap though.
Yeah, well, it's scary to get into that space, to be honest, because both he and Paul Dano, I think both played Brian in that one. Um, there's a struggle that's within there, and I appreciate the willingness to pursue your art. I think it's a cautionary tale about
Yeah.
obsession as well.
Yes, yes.
Um, but it's yeah, yeah, I think that's a good space right now is Beach Boys.
I love that. I love that so much. I was thinking about them quite a bit because, in unrelated, I just saw Bare Naked Ladies. I go to a lot of
Oh,
concerts here in
nice. Okay.
Boston because Boston is such a great concert town,
It
and
really is.
oh, it's amazing, and on all types, everywhere. You
Sure.
wouldn't think it. And this is what I love most about Boston's concerts is everybody sings if they know the song. Everybody, no
Yeah.
matter your age, like all the old men sing at the top of their lungs. We sing like it is our jobs. And we don't care how like there's no pitch. It comes out and it's loud. And I love that because it's just joy. And so,
Yeah.
they singing all of us singing Brian Wilson there at the harbor is at the
Yeah.
top of our
I love
lungs.
that.
Yeah. It's
there's this
beautiful.
shared sense of life. I can't remember the phrase for that. There's this it's a French term that essentially means like effervescent sort of life.
Joie de vivre.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But there's this collective sense of we're all experiencing this together, right?
Yes.
That I love with live performance of any kind. And I think
Well,
that's the
yeah, and I
reason.
think too, when everybody's so happy at rock concerts and pop concerts, things like that, that's my sort of, or I need a dopamine hit, serotonin, just all it up because I absorb all those people just being so happy. And unlike some other cities where they're a little violent and drunk, they're not in Boston. They can hold their liquor. So they're not
Yeah.
fighting. They just want to sing and be happy. And the worst you'll get is someone who's too happy behind you and they're screaming and you got to move because they're screaming the lyrics. So that, yeah, that's my sort of, I call it a plateau rather than a
Right.
mountaintop. And then I'll
Yeah,
go
I like
back
that.
down so I can maintain it.
Yeah.
This was fascinating. I am so glad I got to talk to you because I love hearing experts' thoughts on music and how it works with our brains and how it's a tool and just it is to me one of the best parts of being a human being is
Sure,
just
sure.
experiencing music. And I love all the things you had to say. This was phenomenal. So thank you so much for joining me today, Matthew.
Oh, thank you. It was a real pleasure. It was a great, great time.
All right. And we'll talk soon. Thank you,
All
everyone.
right, take care.
Bye.